so let's get started. My name is Janine Owen. I'm a math education consultant here at Wayne Resa, and I am joined today by Dr. Kristi Hanby. She will be kind of like my producer behind the scenes today. So if you have questions that you need some help maybe with Zoom, you're welcome to message directly to Kristi. She is one of the co-hosts in the chat. She also may be responding to participants in the chat, as well as sharing links with you. But if you are in a position to not be able to copy down the links, do not worry. Tomorrow you should get a copy of the slide presentation as well as all the links that we're sharing today. And that will be emailed to you from Resa tomorrow. So please go ahead and just enjoy, listen, participate, and don't feel like you have to record every single note. There is a sign-in link that Kristi will be dropping in if you'd like to get sketches. You can sign in. There is no sign out though. So our agenda today, we want to frame a vision of high quality math instruction through the lens of the math essential practices, understand how to use a curricular resource in alignment with best practices, highlight success a county colleague had implementing high quality math instruction within her school, and also identify some professional learning available to support high quality math instruction with educators in your building or your district. There's our sign in again. So in this session, we are going to focus on the following driving questions. The first one is our vision of high quality math instruction aligned with current research in mathematics education? Next, we're going to ask ourselves, how can we shift teaching practices while utilizing our current resources? And finally, what are some professional learning opportunities available to Wayne County educators to engage in high quality math instruction? So our learning today is going to be grounded in a few documents that have been provided by MESA. And so we're going to begin framing our vision of high quality math instruction that is grounded in best practices based on current math ed research. So two of those documents include the essential school-wide and center-wide practices in literacy and mathematics. There's one document that's pre-kindergarten to grade 5, and another one that is grades 6 through 12. And the purpose of these documents is to increase Michigan's capacity to improve children's literacy and mathematics learning by identifying systematic and effective practices that can be implemented at the organizational level. So this level would be looking at the district or at the school at large and thinking about what systems do we have in place, or what systems does research tell us will help improve student learning in math and in literacy. We'll also be grounding our learning today, framing our vision of high quality math instruction using the essential instructional practices in early mathematics. So these are now the newest document released this summer is for grades pre-K to grade 5. So some of the language has changed a little bit, some of the descriptions, but overall it's still the same document, just expanded through grade 5. And this document was developed by the Early Math Task Force, which is a subcommittee of the GELN network. And their aim is that children will develop agency in mathematics through exposure to cognitively engaging mathematical tasks in language-rich environments in order to advance their understanding of mathematics in ways that are responsive to their social context. The math essential practices, they are driven by some values that we hold as math educators about children and about learning specifically with math. So if you would go ahead and just look at this document, at the 5 values, and read through them and just think to yourself about what impact there would be on students if we hold these values. So go ahead and just quietly read those to yourself. Okay, so go ahead and if you would please either unmute, or if you'd rather, just enter in the chat. If we were to hold these values as math educators, what do you think the impact will be on students?
It looks like Doug says they'd be more engaged, and Lori is saying they would have more ownership.
Great, yes.
Yes, empowered. Nice word.
Yes. So very student-centered feelings that you guys are surfacing, that students will feel engaged, empowered, they'll have a voice, they'll be engaged in the learning, more ways to understand and achieve, they're more apt to collaborate. All of those things are great signs of learning. Okay, thank you for sharing these. So the essential practices, the Math Essential document, there are 8 practices, and there might be a variety of exposure in the room right now of whether or not you have seen this document or not. So I'll just kind of give you a broad overview of how the practices are organized. The 8 essential instructional practices are strategic, supported by evidence from research and practice, and they're interconnected in many ways. So practices 1 through 3, they focus more on the overall design of the learning environment and general ways of interacting with the learning environment, more like the culture of the room, of the classroom. All of these practices, by the way, as opposed to the organizational practices that we just talked about, or the school-wide or center-wide, this is more focused on the level of the classroom. Essential practice 4 focuses on intentionally and continually embedding formative assessment practice through observation and discussion. So that is our assessment piece, especially the formative assessment piece. Then essentials 5 through 7 focus on the types of mathematical tasks as well as routines that for using these tasks to support deep and meaningful learning of mathematics. Whereas essential practice 8 focuses more on how to engage family members, caregivers, and the process of learning for students with mathematics. We also have a framework developed here at RESA by the math team that outlines what to include for an ambitious tier 1 instruction. And so we kind of wanted to highlight for you what essential practices are in each part of this framework. So the first part of the framework, the yellow part, the number sense routine, this is tied in with essential instructional practice number 6. And this is a shorter period of the framework, 5 to 12 minutes. It's a routine that's done daily to help build procedural fluency from conceptual understanding. The bulk of the lesson of the math task for ambitious tier 1 instruction, based on research and on the essentials, this would include, oh, I don't know why it didn't pop up, sorry. It includes essential instructional practices 5 and sometimes 7. So practice number 5, we're going to talk more about in a moment, but this has to do with implementing cognitively demanding math tasks. And 7 is a subset of that. So it's story problems. So not every task that you do might be conceptualized or like the context might be a story, it might not be a story problem, but when it is, it would fall under essential practice 7. We also have throughout, if you see underneath the bottom arrow, information is gathered to guide interventions and determine practice. That's that formative assessment piece that runs throughout, that as the teacher is noticing and observing students engaged in the math task, they are collecting formative assessment, which is essential practice number 4, that they can then use to help plan for this purple section, which is choosing practice opportunities. So that purple section really dives into what can students do independently on their own to practice, as well as what math stations or centers or games they might be doing, and what the teacher can do to support students in small group instruction. So let's think about your role now as building or as district leaders. And I want you to think about if you were to walk into a space, into a classroom where math learning is taking place, what would you hope to see or hear going on? And it might be a teacher action, it might be a student action. But just go ahead and let me know and share, or go ahead and unmute and share too if you'd like to. What would you hope to see or hear during these walkthroughs? Okay, so Douglas has mentioned he'd like to see kids' discussions about strategies. Valerie mentioned collaboration amongst peers, student leading instruction. Kim mentioned student discussion and teacher leading. Amanda noticed or would like to notice students figuring things out using math. And Zielinski says students sharing their representations and describing their reasoning. Thank you for sharing those thoughts. Okay, so let's just keep that in mind as we move forward. We're now going to look at two classroom examples of two different routines. The first one is going to be third grade students that are engaged in a cognitively demanding math task, which is tied with essential number 5. And both of these are short clips, but they are from classrooms where they are engaged in these research-based practices. The second clip is going to be tied with essential number 6, and it's just going to show you a portion of the number talk taking place in a second grade classroom. So as you are watching this, if you can just look for evidence of the values that we discussed previously going on, and maybe also think about what you hope to observe when you are entering math classrooms like you just mentioned. See if you can notice any of those things taking place here. So we'll start off here. Let me just make sure.
So I want you guys to head back to your table in just a second. And I want everybody at your table to build me a rectangle that has the dimensions of a 4 by 6 using your linear pieces in an area of, you're gonna have to figure out the area. Get it, got it? Build and frame a tile rectangle. Use colored tiles and red linear pieces. So I want you to build one that looks just like this. Study it for a second. When you know how you're gonna build it, you may silently go back to your seat. If you finish early, I would like you to make some labels on the table with your Expo marker.
Because you're just
Boys and girls, I have a question for you. Yeah, what's the area?
4 square units.
Yeah, what do we know about this one tile?
1 inch.
Yes, 24 square inches. All right, do you guys agree that the area is 24 square inches?
Yes.
I have a challenge for you. What is going to happen if I were to break apart this rectangular array into smaller regions, just like we did in our number talk?
Whatever this would be, and then 4 more, and then that would be 20, and then add some more.
If we break it into smaller regions and put it back together, it does our area change. Still the same area. How you get there is a little bit what? A little bit easier. Yeah. I want you to add labels and equations, and we are going to take some time and we're going to walk around and look at everyone's strategies. Get it? Got it?
Good. Yeah.
Okay, so that was the students engaged in Essential 5, the cognitively demanding math task. Now we're going to look at that first section of our math and Tier 1 ambitious framework that I showed you, the number sense routine. So this is a portion of the number talk going on in a second grade classroom.
boys and girls, I am going to put an addition problem up on the board for you guys to do for our number talk today. Okay? Remember, when you look at this problem, go ahead and give me a thumbs up when you know the answer to the problem. And when you can explain the problem, put a finger out. Boys and girls, go ahead and talk to your neighbor about what you got for an answer. So who in here would like to explain what they did to get 83 today? Trey, go ahead.
So I knew 2 plus 8 equals 10, so I got 80. Then I added 3 more. That's how I got 83.
Did somebody do it a different way? Rosie,
I counted on.
you counted on. So when you counted on, what did that sound like?
78, 79, 80, 81, 82, 83.
How did you know to stop at 83? Go ahead, Cleo.
This is because 2 plus 3 is 5, and there's 1. There's 2 right there.
There's 2 right here?
Well, 4 right there.
Well, 4.
Yeah. Then there's 2 right there, but there's 6 right there. In that entire line, there's 6.
Okay. So how does 83 work for you?
Because, like Trey said, 8 plus 2 is 10.
Okay, so here's our 8 plus our 2 more.
And that's our 10.
There's our 10. And then there's our 3 more. I've got a new problem. Are you guys ready? 78 plus 15. Okay, who would like to tell me what you got for that answer?
93.
93. Jimena, would you like to explain?
So I took 2 from the 5 and put it in the 8, and then I took the 8 and put it in the 7th place, and it was 80, and then I grabbed the 1 from the 15 and put in the 7th place again, and then it was 90, and then I grabbed the 3 more from the 5, and it was 93.
Okay, so you said that there's a 2 and a 3 in that problem. So you said you did the 8 and the 2 to get a 10. And so then you said you added that 10 to the 7 in the 10's place. Okay. And you got 80. And then you said you took the other 10 from this problem to get 90. And then you said 90 plus this 3 got you 93.
Okay, so we can see here that from these 2 brief windows into these math classrooms where you see very engaged students and they are taking part in this high quality math instruction and these routines. But students have voice, they have agency, they're the knowers and the doers of the math that is happening. There's not a culture of compliance where the teacher is the one that knows, that has all of the knowledge and is passing it on to the students. Instead, the students are relaying their strategy to the teacher, and the teacher is really a helpful voice in helping to communicate their thinking back on to the rest of the students and asking for clarification if they don't understand. I'm going to, sorry, I lost all my participant video right now, so it's hard to see what's going on. Okay. So we're going to move on to thinking about in your school, how could you start to help to make these shifts in teaching and learning that go on in math classrooms in your school, and helping your educators to make these shifts towards more high quality math instruction approaches, as opposed to maybe what typically goes on in math classrooms where the teacher is the one with all of the knowledge and the teacher is the one kind of modeling and guiding the students through their thinking. So one tool that might be helpful to you to kind of get your teachers to just start to think about their classroom right now, and if it is a culture that is supporting equitable sense making. This is a table that was actually used for science purposes, science teaching and learning, but we've adapted it to fit with math. But it helps to think about who is engaged in the classroom, who is treated as a knower in the classroom, what ways of knowing are privileged in the classroom, and then where it says what science is practiced in the classroom, we also think about it as mathematics. So mathematics is not framed as just the memorization of facts and procedures, and it's about making sense of the world around us. So this table, Kristi will be sharing in chat. She just did. So you're welcome to use this maybe at PLCs or in some other way that might help to start some discussion. So one area that we have found that schools tend to see a lot of growth and changes when they focus on Essential Practice 5, and that is selecting and implementing cognitively demanding tasks using your own instructional resources. So let's start to think about how can we shift those teaching practice, but using our current resources that we already have. All right, so what we are going to do is start to unpack this Essential 5. If you can just look in the purple section only, these bullets will go more into depth about how to develop with Essential 5, but if you want to just read the top portion, it'll kind of give you a snapshot of what this Essential is all about. Okay, so now if you could go ahead and just share either a keyword or a phrase, that sticks out to you from that purple section of Essential 5 in the chat. So what do you think is something that kind of sticks out to you about Essential 5? Okay, allowing multiple entry points, engaging children in mathematical reasoning, high expectations. Yes, thank you for these. Leading to deep learning. Thank you, I appreciate your sharing. So all of these things that you are kind of pulling out and latching onto have to do with the DOK level. So the depth of knowledge that as building leaders, I'm sure you're used to thinking through. So when we think about a cognitively demanding math task, what we're talking about is having a task that has higher rigor. And when we think of what it means to have higher rigor, it doesn't necessarily mean that the math itself is harder, that the content is harder or tricky. Instead, it means that the students are doing the bulk of the thinking and the bulk of the work that is going on in the classroom. So a higher DOK level is also associated with the students being more engaged or things that are more likely to lead to discussion. So if it's just, for example, memorizing facts like on a time test, that would be more of a low DOK. There wouldn't be much discussion, maybe not a whole lot of engagement. But when there's something like a math task where there's an open-ended question and students are able to discuss multiple strategies or ways to start, that would be an example of a higher level, a cognitively demanding math task. We have a quote here by Peter Liljedahl, and it says, thinking is a necessary precursor to learning. And if students are not thinking, they are not learning. So if we're in a traditional math classroom where it seems like the teacher is the one who knows has all the knowledge and they're passing it on to their students, they might be the ones that are doing the learning and the thinking. Some common characteristics of a task, you'll notice that a lot of these are also going to kind of harken back to that purple box that we just read under Essential 5. There's a lot of similarities. But a task will align to the learning target for the lesson. It will be cognitively demanding at the grade level content. So not a grade level below, but the grade level content. It should be authentic and relevant, have multiple entry points, allow for different strategies or solution methods, and encourage students to use representations. It also will provide an opportunity to communicate their reasoning. So what we'll do now is we're going to look at a couple different curricular resources that a district might have. And how would you go about, how would you help your educators go about selecting and implementing a cognitively demanding task using what you already have? So this is an example of what it looks like for a grade 2 lesson where the focus is on partitioning shapes and naming fractions. And in this resource, here you can see that there are 12 different activities, okay? And some of the things that the teacher can choose from doing would be practice with computation, building vocabulary, connecting to children's literature, pattern block exploration, reteaching and enrichment, modeling and drawing, advanced learners, independent practice, problem solving and application, small group activities, practice and homework, or a lesson check for understanding. So in a normal lesson, you will see that teachers are making lots of choices about the learning task. There's not possibly enough time to get through everything that a curricular resource has to offer. And so what they have to do is make choices about what they are going to present to students and what students are going to be engaged with. What we are trying to do is have teachers elevate to take from this curricular resource, choosing a task that is cognitively demanding. So we're going to give you 2 examples. If I were a teacher with this resource, I might pull out this page, for example. This would be a modeling and drawing exercise. But if you look closely at this, the student does not have to partition the shape at all. The shapes are already partitioned for them. Instead, all they really need to do is be able to count how many parts there are, and they should be able to use the words halves, thirds, or fourths correctly, which are already written for them above, so that they would just need to be able to copy down the correct word to go with the correct number of parts. So that's one example. Another example, though, would be that maybe the teacher looks over here. One of the choices was to use construction paper, and it says to challenge children to use different shapes to illustrate equal parts. And kids will be folding or cutting the construction paper to model halves, thirds, and fourths. Now here you might notice that students they have to partition the shape themselves. So they're going to have to create the shape and then they have to partition it. Now to make this into a math task, a teacher might change the language a little bit, and they might provide a context that would make sense to students. So they might say, pretend your shape is a brownie. Fold your brownie to share with 2 or 3 or 4 friends. And so now this is in a context that students can understand and relate to, but the student is doing all of the thinking and all of the work associated with the standard. So that was one example. We're also going to show you another video example now. But before we show you the video, I wanted to provide context about what the students are doing. So they are using Bridges, and it's going to be grade 1, unit 5. It is a geometry module. So they need to demonstrate an understanding of the difference between defining and non-defining attributes of a 3D shape. So that's the standard that they're working on. And what they are going to be doing is using some snap cubes to see if it will make a cube if they have 6 squares. They also have a prediction record sheet. And so what we're going to see next is students engaged in this task. So the question is going to be for the kids, will this net make a cube, make a prediction, and check?
We're going to use square polydrons, and we're going to lay them out in something called a net. And then we're going to see if we can fold up those sides to make a cube. Do you think I can fold up these sides and make a cube? I want you to think about it for a minute. Let's make a prediction, okay? Put your hand by your heart. So everybody show me what you think right now. I wonder if every time I lay my square polydrons out in a net, do you think it will always make a cube? I'm thinking about it. Do you think it would always make a cube? Will you turn and talk?
She kind of do. Not like all in that they would have
So first, we have to make our what? Our prediction. All right, take a look at that net.
But at least you could tell it was a yes. Because look at we have two more, right? We put that at the top.
Well, yes or no? Did it make a cube? Yes. Then we're going to come over here and make a prediction. All right, so let's make a prediction about the next net.
I circled one. Different. Okay. Hold on. Well, it doesn't make cube.
We were wondering if every net, no matter how we laid it out, would fold up to make a cube.
Some of them won't and some of them will. And you just have to build them to see if they are or if they're not.
Oh, what else did you notice?
Some of the cubes didn't have like faces. The cubes or.
So you're saying when you folded up some of the squares that they didn't have faces on, where it was open, no faces? Yeah. Could that be a cube with no faces there? No. All right, boys and girls, you learned a lot today. You did a lot of good thinking and learning, and we're gonna work some more with some other polyhedron shapes, okay?
Okay, so we've shown you so far a lot of elementary examples, but we did want you to know that this is just as applicable to secondary classrooms, mathematics classrooms. So this is an example of a curricular resource in 6th grade. And this would be from their Unit 7 on equations and inequalities. It's from Big Ideas Math. So if you were to look at a typical workbook page for the students, you might notice that on like number 19 could make a great math task. And so the verbiage could just be changed a little bit to say how many, and I'm gonna butcher that name, drums did you sell? Write an equation you can use to find the number of drums you sold. So this can be applied to secondary classrooms as well. We also have secondary mathematics consultants on our team that I'll share their information with you later, but they are more than willing to help with getting implementing math tasks at the secondary level also. So now that we have a common understanding of high quality math instruction, specifically with Essential 5, implementing cognitively demanding math tasks, how should or could you begin to support this work with your staff? One thing that we like to caution against is that as you began to plan to improve math instruction in your school or in your district, be aware of common thinking traps that we experience and that we believe in education system. So often what happens is teachers don't have some skill, or they're not doing some way of teaching that we believe that we'd like them to. And so then we believe that if we can just provide professional learning one time, or maybe share some tools through email, or have a staff meeting on this topic, that then they'll have it. And we know that research has told us we cannot have these one and done or one-off things where teachers experience some learning and real change happens. So instead, we want to think about how can we empower this transformative learning for educators in a way that will be sustainable. And it is a process. So we're going to start by just listening to a short clip. This is advice from a principal named Pam Thomas, and she's in Kent County on the west side of the state. But she's just talking a little bit about how she got started with the Math Essentials learning in her school.
When I think of advice I would give to other administrators, one of the things that I think is critical is that we learn alongside our teachers. And I will tell you, one of the things I've committed to when I took this job was anytime my teachers were learning something, I was sitting right next to them. I think it offers us the opportunity to really engage in those rich conversations with teachers if we have the same knowledge base. So it's building my own knowledge base. I also think it gives our teachers a really strong message that we don't know it all. And we are learning too, and we're willing to learn right alongside them. And the second piece of advice I would give administrators would be to model what we're asking them to do in classrooms. So, if I'm asking them to be a student-centered classroom where students have voice and choice, am I doing that with the teachers? And I think our shared leadership and our building teams where everyone's on a building team, they have that voice and choice. If I'm asking teachers to do learning targets and success criteria, I should be doing that during my professional learning opportunities with teachers. So trying to model exactly what we're asking them to do in the classroom. And I think not only does that help the learning, but it also shows that not only is this good for students learning, but it's good for adult learners as well.
Okay, so some other considerations as we begin to shift math instruction in our school community is thinking about what do we want teachers, what do they need to know, what do they need to become, and what do they need to do to achieve our vision. So there are some driving questions that we can ask ourselves or ask our planning teams, our leadership teams as we start this new learning. We also need to consider that educator learning unfolds in a typical way. So research tells us that there's often resistance in the beginning, where people will actively resist or oppose new expectations, especially if they believe that it will be ineffective, or that maybe it will be something that just comes along for a while, but then is dropped. Eventually, there may be some compliance. And what we hope, though, is that eventually there's internalization. So how do we get all the way from resistance to internalization? It takes time. And what we need to think about is what kinds of events, routines, tools, and people do we need to put in place to support our educators as they learn? And this bottom portion of the right side of the graphic shows how teachers can really take part in this risk-taking and experimentation if they are able to collaborate. They'll be able to engage in reflective dialogue. If there's deprivatization of practice, so if grade level teams are able to observe each other, or if you do instructional rounds or learning lab kind of things within your school community, a collective focus on student learning. So making sure it's all about student data and how students are responding to this new type of teaching and learning. But just that trust, the shared norms and values, everything that we want to be in place in a classroom needs to also be in place in our building culture to allow teachers to take risks and make truly transformative learning happening. So now what I'd like to share with you is an interview. I had the privilege to interview Dr. Tracy Bryant. She's a principal at Rawsonville Elementary School in Van Buren Schools. And she reached out to our math team in the late spring, because she had tremendous success, and it showed in her scores based on some math improvement that they've been doing as a staff. And so Ms. Bryan is she's at a school that's a Title I school. There's about 300 students total. It's a K-4 school. They had pretty low, less than 10% proficient on MSTEP in previous years, and their iReady scores were something new to them. They just switched over to iReady, but they had pretty low fall proficiency. And what they had been working on over 2 years is first implementing number talks. When they did that, they started to, teachers felt more confident starting with something like number talk, because it is a routine that only takes a few minutes each day. And so, but this really developed the student discourse in the school. It developed students sharing strategies and thinking about math in a new way. so that their second year, what they started was implementing cognitively demanding math tasks. And when they did it, it was not just a one and done kind of thing. Ms. Bryant mentioned that she would have monthly check-in meetings with grade level teams where they would have to bring artifacts like student work from the math tasks or student assessments, like they used exit tickets a lot for all of the lessons. And the teachers were involved in these reflective data conversations, but they were in a more informal manner. And so the teachers were able to reflect on how things were going, and they really were able to talk through some struggles that they had. The biggest struggle that they mentioned, honestly, was time it took to select the task from the curricular resource and being able to do that as a team. Now that they have that, of course, it'll be much easier, but that was one of the struggles that they mentioned. But what I want to show you is after a year of working on this, and this was just their first year, their data was reflected a lot of this growth from in iReady from growth from fall to spring. So the kindergarten students, they showed the most growth. They had a 77% of them were proficient in math, and it was a little bit less so in third and fourth grade. One thing that Mrs. Bryant mentioned was that those third and fourth graders were affected a lot by the pandemic when it happened, as you all know. I mean, the third graders were kindergartners. The fourth graders were first graders when they had to go home in March of that year. So, and then the whole next year was very different. So there was more of a loss to make up for, but they hope that this year they're going to see even greater gains in those two grade levels as they continue to implement cognitively demanding math tasks. But we were very impressed with the amount of growth that she experienced, and she was just very happy that teachers had stuck with it even when they were struggling, and they now can see the value in teaching math this way. So they're happy to stick with it at this point. We also have the M-STEP scores are still embargoed, but she saw that they also had made better proficiency in math than in reading at each grade level this year. So what I'd like to share now are some opportunities for that and ways that we as the Wayne Risa math team, as well as I'll share some resources from MESA at the state level, how we can support you as a building or as a district leader with professional learning when it comes to your educators. So looking back at this ambitious tier 1 ambitious math instruction, we do have professional learning related to number talks. These are all courses that are online and they're self-paced. There is a fee on there for the book itself, but this is something that your teachers could enter in throughout the year. We have different starting dates. We also offer courses related to math intervention and MTSS. So we have an AVMR winter cohort coming that would be focusing on addition and subtraction. We also offer MTSS in place value, multiplication, and division. There will also be a winter cohort coming. And as well as MTSS in mathematics, which is focused on fractions. Some other courses that we offer connected to multiple elements of the whole mathematics, high quality math instruction vision. We offer equity in mathematics, secondary math leaders that is for elementary. And then we also have the Wayne County Literacy Coaching Network is now expanding this year to include all instructional coaches and coaches from other content areas. And the registration link is there. MESA also, the Early Math Task Force, if you go to mathessentials.org, there are a tremendous plethora of resources you can find there. So you can find the essentials, you can find the values. There's also online learning modules that teachers can sign up for that are free on EduPath. And right now they have out the number Essential 5. So they could actually take a self-guided course for Essential Practice 5. And I think that they offer even sketches on there. There's also resources for either coaches or yourself building leaders, they have some resources on there. If you were going to facilitate some learning, there's some facilitator resources. And then in the upcoming events tab, that's where you can find free professional learning events that are offered through the Early Math Task Force, through the grant work that we have. Really great learning opportunities that you could send yourself or coaches to, or teachers. And then finally, on the YouTube site for Early Math, if you subscribe there, there's so many videos on there that would be great to use with PLCs or with any kind of professional learning that you have going on. They are organized in the playlist by grade level, and there's also interviews with teachers and interviews with building leaders that are available. And then I wanted to include all of our contact information for the Wayne Risa math team. So I'm Janine Owen. I'm part of the pre-K to 5 team. We also have Dawn Chauvin. She is involved with a lot of our pre-K work all the way up through 5th. Sonia Malik is on loan to Mesa. She's part of the early math task work, but she does do some of our MTSS for addition and subtraction workshops. And then we have our secondary consultants, Sharon, Kristi, and David. They all are very helpful with grades 3 through 12. So thank you very much for coming. If you have any other questions and want to stay behind, you're welcome to do that. Otherwise, I appreciate your engagement, and I hope you have a great rest of your day and a great first week of school.